Do you want to start a podcast, but you're worried you'll sound like the podcast bros perpetuating nonsense? Or you're worried that the market is too saturated? Worry not. I have a tutorial for you that will show you all of the steps to curating a professional show that's bound to give your listeners an outstanding experience. Throughout this 7 or so episode series, I'll show you the steps I took to create my podcast and the things I've learned that have helped me remain consistent and interested in the topics I'm speaking about. Hello and welcome back to our final episode of the How to Start a Podcast tutorial. Today we're discussing building community. We're discussing what goes into setting up your hosting platform, launching your show, different ways you can position your content to appeal to the stages your audience goes through, building and nurturing your network through digital marketing. Now, to start us off with hosting platforms, it's important to choose the right hosting platform for your podcast. Anchor, SoundCloud, and Rumble are popular options, but there are others out there as well. Consider factors such as ease of use, pricing, if any, and features offered when choosing a platform. Additionally, make sure that the platform you choose allows you to distribute your podcast to major platforms like Apple Podcasts, Spotify, and Google Podcasts, or even Amazon Podcasts. Like there's actually so many different places you can distribute your show. I believe YouTube also has a podcast option. But look into these different things of like where your people may be hanging out. I've chosen Anchor because it distributes my podcast to the major platforms, it's free, and it allows me to edit my episodes after posting it if it has mistakes or I want to change my intro for the thousandth time. If you choose a different one, be sure to look into their policy on intellectual property. Some platforms may claim the rights to your show if it's distributed by them, which you don't want to happen if you're also posting it to YouTube or you're planning to monetize. As for availability, make sure your podcast is available on all major platforms so that the people can find you and listen to it easily. The most popular platforms to consider are Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Anchor, Amazon Music, and Audible. And there are many, many more, as mentioned before. Each platform has its own submission process, so make sure to follow their guidelines and requirements. For example, distributing my podcast to Spotify was super easy with Anchor because Anchor is a Spotify product. But distributing my podcast to Apple, I had to sign up through their system to get a code from Apple Podcasts, and the connection was less automatic. I chose to only distribute my show on Apple, Spotify, and Anchor, honestly, because they were the easiest to sign up for, and I haven't even heard of all of the options for places Anchor can distribute your show, so I assume the majority of my audience will come from those places. That could be a flaw on my end. I assume that people are exclusively going to come from the most popular platforms. That may not be true for you. I encourage you to follow your heart. You can go all out with the platforms you distribute your show on if you want to, but I can't say I'm an expert in all of the platforms that exist. As for your launch, a successful launch plan can help your podcast gain traction and attract listeners. Consider creating a launch plan that includes promotion on social media, reaching out to friends and family, and securing guest appearances on other podcasts. I'll dive a little deeper into creating your launch plan with marketing later in this episode. Your greatest asset to jumpstarting your audience is your friends. They'll help you start to build momentum, but I'll caution you not to rely too heavily on your inner network to maintain your momentum. This is because your friends love you and want to support you, but they don't necessarily love the subject matter you're covering. If they do, that's golden, but it's important not to put pressure on our friends to carry our dreams. In my last tutorial episode, we discussed getting guests to appear on your show, but in this case, while you're launching, it's a good idea to ask people if they'd be willing to have you as a guest on their show. You can follow a similar protocol to reaching out to get an appearance as I highlighted in my last episode. The only change you'll make is instead of selling them on why having them on your show is an asset, you'll sell them on why you being on their show is also an asset to their audience. And now for your audience and their phases. When you're developing a community around your podcast, your brand, or even your business, your customers will move through phases of curiosity that lead them to loyalty. It's your job as the creator to make it easy for someone to decide to subscribe. Perhaps you're embarking on a journey together to understand the complexities of life. Or perhaps you're leading by example to show people how to live more authentically. Or you provide hot takes on current events. Or you tell stories about historical events. Or you tell people about your worm farm. The possibilities of why someone would want to follow you are endless. Your challenge is to find the direction you can take that lands for others and to keep providing value around what people respond to. This means not only are you journeying through the complexities of life together, you're also helping people feel seen and that they don't have it all figured out yet, and that is totally okay. The key with enticing people to stay engaged is tapping into why they should care. You can use your creations to make people feel seen, to overcome what holds them back, to inform and enrich, to entertain. Really, the options are endless. Your greatest goal will be to find that thing that sparks joy in your heart at the same time as it sparks interest from your listeners. When it comes to helping people find you, you may want to consider creating multiple types of content. Katie Steckley has an awesome video that covers the type of content you need to create to grow your YouTube channel. I'll link the video in the description, and I'm going to break this down in my own way, but if you want another take on it, I highly recommend checking it out. What she and other YouTube creators speak about is hub, hero, and help content. I've tested this out on my podcast as well, and I can say that my audio audience hasn't grown since starting this tutorial, but my YouTube audience has. This is probably because the type of content people are looking for is different given the format of the video. Most people are visual learners, so when I'm teaching you how to start a podcast with this tutorial, even though my videos don't have any visual aid beyond just my lovely face, they're still more likely to be interested in how-to content on YouTube because typically learning has that sort of video aspect. Your hub content is your go-to content for consistency. This means having a baseline that you can always return to. For me, this is discussing self-sabotage and creativity. This type of hub content is not likely to go viral. Instead, it creates connection with your recurring audience. I experiment with different things. My first interview was about health and wellness, which is a little bit different than my regular topics of my show. Then there's this tutorial series, and I've experimented with my editing and scripting process behind the scenes too. But regardless of what test I conduct with my platform, I always return to the hub of knowledge I have around self sabotage and creativity. Your help content is how to or advice content that helps your channel grow with searchability. Tutorials help a potential audience find you in search. I've noticed growth in my subscribers and views for my regular show since creating this how to start a podcast tutorial. So I must say, help content does make a difference when it comes to getting eyes on your creations, at least for YouTube. Your hero content is taboo or controversial content, or your big swings towards virality. Speak on hot topics people are interested in and offer a perspective that's alternative to the perceived norm. This is likely the most challenging content to create. There's a pinch of magic that has to take place in order for you to catch a trend early enough in its life cycle that you can offer a unique perspective while its searchability is still skyrocketing. I won't really recommend to you to try to go viral. It's not that it's a bad thing to go viral, but it can be if you're not ready to nurture that size of an audience, or if you're placing too high of an expectation on yourself to go viral every time you post. Rather than recommend to you to try to go viral, I recommend you speak to your honest opinions and don't shy away from a bit of controversy. People engage with people who have opinions, and I encourage you to work some of yours into your hub content. And on a side note, another sort of downside to virality is there's been instances where people have set out on YouTube and or podcasts or whatever, and they've skyrocketed right away and they're at the top of their game right away. But then over time, they realize that they want to actually talk about something different. So all of the people that they have on their videos are not necessarily invested in the topics that they actually really want to speak about. For example, I know Brock Johnson, he went viral on TikTok for dancing videos, but what he actually does is he teaches people about social media growth. So, although he has whatever hundreds of thousands of followers on TikTok, none of those people actually give a crap about what he teaches for social media growth. So, he has to actually start over on a completely fresh account with TikTok so that he can grow his page with people who are actually invested in his career. Going viral is not necessarily the goal, but rather nurturing your audience is. You're better off creating a community that you can connect with one painstaking listener at a time than you are to go viral. This is because going viral feels great at first, but in terms of your overall momentum, it acts like a boom and a crash. You'll see a huge spike in your engagements and then a sudden crash that may only leave you with all of the feelings of lack and not good enough when the same thing doesn't happen the same way next week. Slow and steady wins the race, my guy. Start with the goal to get 2 to 3 consistent listeners, and then jump to 10, and then jump to 100, and so on, as a trickle effect rather than a big boom. Not only does this give you more sustainable growth, but it also allows you to nurture each individual as they enter your community. Not only that, but you're also allowed to post things online without the expectation that anyone will see it. They will see it eventually, but you don't need to expect the world of yourself to get started. And now for your network. Building a network can refer to connecting with listeners and connecting with competitors. A network of fellow podcasters can be beneficial for cross promotion and collaboration. Join podcasting groups on social media, attend events and conferences, and reach out to other podcasters to build relationships. Building your network means you're not exclusively relying on friends and family because they care about you and they want to support what you're doing, but they're not likely to maintain a high level of enthusiasm towards your show over time unless they're also personally interested in the subject matter you cover. Your goal with networking, rather, is to build a community around the subject matter you speak about. If you want 1,000 listeners on your show, that's not likely to come from your 10 friends who love you, and more likely to come from supporters towards your cause. When you're networking, spend less time trying to make people love you and more time pitching your cause. Encourage comments and feedback within your episodes to avoid screaming into the void. If you've already started your show, you know how discouraging it can be to create quality work on a weekly basis with insightful questions just to hear crickets. Don't get discouraged if you're not getting feedback right away, and even if you are a little discouraged, that's completely human, and keep asking for feedback. Network with your audience and your competitors on social media. This means having conversations with people in their comments and in your DMs. There's a way to do this that doesn't involve cold calling. Instead of reaching out to a random person to say, "Hi, my name's so and so, and I have a podcast about XYZ. Here's my link, you can listen." Try starting with a simple greeting and a compliment like, "Hi, I love this post you made. I hope everything is well in your world." And if you're met with warmth, take it from there by asking them more about their interests and suggest your show when you notice alignment. And now for nurturing your audience. It's important to nurture your community by engaging with them online and responding to feedback. Consider creating a social media presence for your podcast where you can interact with listeners and share behind the scenes content. Tell them why they should follow and subscribe, but honestly, sometimes I wonder if people need to be told to subscribe because if you're nurturing your show and seeking feedback, people will subscribe on their own free will. I will still probably ask people to subscribe, I just wonder what effect it ultimately has on their decision. Kinda like when you remind me to eat the berries in the fridge, and then suddenly I hate berries and I never wanna eat the berries in the fridge until they go moldy. When you tell somebody to do something, it kinda makes them absolutely not wanna do it. Asking for feedback is actually different than asking people to subscribe, because asking people to subscribe is ultimately more for vanity metrics, whereas asking people for feedback gives your audience an outlet for their own ideas and inspirations to be integrated into your show. I'm convinced that the majority of people who listen to podcasts or scroll on social media do so silently. Everyone has their 2 cents to add to everything they encounter, but most people won't actually tell you what they think until they're invited. Wink. When you do eventually get feedback, cater your content to the feedback you receive. If you're making content about creativity, but people really seem more interested in your worm farm, there is no shame in switching subject matters to cater to your people. I say this because the craft you can master that contributes to collective benefit may lead you to your calling. Although I want to mention, you don't need to adjust every piece of feedback you receive. You can stick to the way that you want to do things if you want to. This is your space to be yourself, and you can trust yourself to follow through with the things that are actually meant for you. Nurture yourself equally to how you nurture your audience and your podcast. This means saying no to irrelevant feedback. Give yourself grace to learn. Give yourself time to rest and trust the creative process, and give yourself space to play and to experiment. Take breaks, batch create, commit yourself to a consistent, sustainable schedule. This means you allow yourself time to live your life, including spending time doing absolutely nothing. And now for social media and digital marketing. Many people with podcasts also have a YouTube channel and or a Patreon page. Try what works for you, but I encourage you to adopt a one at a time method. Before branching your podcast off to YouTube, ensure you have a good grasp on scripting, recording, and editing your audios before taking on a new platform and format. Starting a podcast involves more than just your actual show, it also involves promoting it. Create social media videos and graphics that highlight the most shareable aspects to each episode. Potentially take segments from your script rather than your video and record it again so that the content looks like it was actually made specifically for the platform you're using. Managing a social media account is laborious. Creating structures can make the process smoother, like batching likes with likes, using templates, and eventually outsourcing the aspects to your show that don't make your heart sing. You can even work with a producer if that's something that would make the whole process easier for you. When you're creating your show, you'll want to create a plan to launch. Before you even post your first episode, you'll want to know how you're going to market your release. Introduce your host, tell people that your show is coming and what you'll be discussing, market things like your release dates, behind the scenes, your main hub topics, new topics and directions, guests and changes to the plan, and create a plan of action to deliver all of these things to your audience on a weekly basis. You can market your show in so many ways. Another equal strategy to social media is managing an email list. Instead of telling people to follow you on Instagram, invite them to join your email list where you can inform them on new updates, summaries, and engage with their feedback. You can also consider turning your episodes into a blog by editing your scripts and publishing them on a website. If you do utilize social media platforms, email lists, or paid subscription service like Patreon, you could also consider offering a special promotion or bonus content to encourage people to follow you on other platforms. Like for me, I offer marketing activity sheets for anyone who contributes to my Ko-fi page. Is it Ko-fi or coffee? I don't know. Whatever. Ultimately, the main goal of marketing your show is to obtain community engagements and feedback. This can help you expand your reach, ask questions, and integrate your audience's knowledge into your show. I'd also like to take this opportunity to invite you to subscribe. Although your free will has already told you to subscribe because this tutorial has been absolutely incredible, right? But in seriousness, you should subscribe as I'm planning on creating another tutorial all about marketing where we will cover this whole social media thing in more detail. I'm going to tell you about the absolute basics of social media for my digital illiterate friends and how we can use ChatGPT to cut down the time it takes to conduct your marketing activities, and more advanced marketing concepts like structures you can use to make the process easier and how to analyze data from your experiments. Now, to wrap up the final episode of the How to Start a Podcast tutorial. Today, we've covered launching your podcast, all of the media you'll need to create, both for your show and for your marketing plan. We've also discussed nurturing audiences and the phases they undergo as a member of your community. I want to take a second to thank you so deeply for joining me on this journey. If you haven't seen the 6 other episodes within this tutorial yet, I encourage you to do so. We've covered everything from what you'll want to think about before you even start scripting to what you can do to save time when you're recording and editing, and what to consider while growing and maintaining your show on an ongoing basis. I have one more short episode coming out soon to close out this tutorial and to introduce my next one, but that's all for this tutorial. Thanks again for being here with me, and cheers for now. Anyway, thank you so much for being here with me. If you haven't already, now is your chance to subscribe to my channel. On a weekly basis, we talk about the superpowers and setbacks of perceived flaws to develop self-acceptance. We also discuss cultivating creativity with sustainable work-life balance, and now we talk about podcasting. Check out the links in my description for all the ways that I can help you, and thanks again for being here. Cheers for now.